we have, a couple great folks from the buy side and two old friends here. And then if you've been in the advertising business at all for a while, if you don't know Jack Myers, you've also been under a rock. So Jack, it's great to have you here. Joshua and G, I wish we could be doing this over wine somewhere, but hopefully sometime soon.
Or bourbon.
Well, that works too, absolutely. So we're starting a little late, but we'll catch it up on the backside here. And why don't we just do some very brief intros so we can jump into the conversation. G, we'll start with you, and then Jack, you're kind of run this conversation, and I'll be right there by your side.
Fair enough.
G, introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I lead the digital team at Carat, and I'm here today just to mess with Joshua's life.
Well, great, excellent. Joshua, you gotta have a clever retort to that. So
I mean, G and I are former colleagues and close friends, so no retort other than I know where all the good Australian food is to keep a partner happy, and I'm the Chief Digital Officer and Global Brand Safety Officer at UN.
That's great. And Jack, please introduce yourself for those out there who don't know you.
So I'm chairman and founder of Media Village and advancingdiversity.org. And I'm here to mess with your life, Drew.
Oh. Well, see, if I'm going to make you the primary moderator, then I can just turn my video off.
Well, you did that, obviously you had your break on the last panel, but you gave us this incredible challenge of the great consumer reset. Okay, we could talk about that.
Yeah.
The future of advertising, and then cookies, cancel culture, and consumer choice. Now, we could take any one of those, especially cancel culture, and have a heck of a conversation.
Yeah.
But G and Joshua, I'd love to just, Drew, if you don't mind, go off script a bit, because I was really taken by Mark from Cognizant's comment in one of his closing comments about the customer experience.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking what we have here are, with G and Joshua, are two buy-side customers.
Right.
Of the media sell side. And I'd love to hear your point of view as we're in an upfront where the networks are asking for 30% increases. I'm sure that's filtering down to you. And but can we start with a question, do you think, about whether the media is in fact investing in improving your customer experience?
Our customer experience
Go ahead, Joshua.
As buyers of media?
As buyers of media, yep. Buyers, planners, strategists. Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great question. I would say that each of the individual media companies probably think they are to some extent. I think collectively the industry is not doing enough to actually make from the buy side easier. And you look at, to sort of preview the other rest of the conversation, you look at the deprecation of third-party cookies and data changes and the arrival of so many competing alternative solutions who are all promising to be the one, and none of them are, rather than the industry getting together and cooperating. I think that demonstrates there is a lack of focusing on the user experience of us on the buy side, whether it's agencies like G and myself or our clients.
G, what do you think?
So it's a core belief of Carat, right? This predates my arrival, but Carat as an agency has always believed that media can and should make people's lives better. And Joshua knows I'm generally not a feelings person, but it resonated quite a bit with me when you think about what's happening right now. So as the great example, it leads right into actually our prepared topics. If you think about the promise we made consumers, hey, in exchange for your data, we will personalize your digital experience. We will make your life better. We will provide utility, right? That was a promise. The opt-out rate that we're seeing and the general apathy that we're seeing right now with consumers is a pretty good indication of how we've scored to date. So I would say it's not that I don't know that we've necessarily fulfilled our side of the bargain, but I think we have to now.
And as you look at the data component of that, which you're both touched on, Joshua, you went right to data. G, your question, but first party data that you're looking, your clients first party data that you're looking at through the prism of Axiom or Merkle, that's come to play much more prominently in this year's upfront, where you have a lot more of your clients' first party data and then your own. Yet, and the networks, as you point out, G, are developing a lot of their own first party data and trying to input it in. How do you see data playing differently in this year's media buying in the upfront and beyond versus last year or the year before?
Well, we're both digital people, Joshua and me, so you're going to get a slightly biased answer. My personal opinion is I don't know that kind of our industry really taking this kind of first party data trend very seriously, or as serious as it should be. And I can say on our part, it started long before like this kind of the iOS 14 change or a date being associated with like the deprecation of third-party cookies. But this is kind of now opening up conversations about data collaboration, kind of data augmentation, data enhancement, all in servitude of our clients' first-party data, right? But I don't know that it's necessarily creating a step change in our entire ecosystem.
I mean, I would echo that. I think, and I'll sort of let's talk about traditional foundational media. If you look at those companies that are collecting first-party data now and then trying to push it through to their digital, platforms and products, you're still seeing antiquated approaches to bundling content. So you look at advanced TV and addressable advertising on advanced TV, the ability to actually use addressable data, but actually then exclude or prioritize certain types of content or programming is still completely absent. That's great. You've got all this first party data, you can chase the audience, but if there's content that you don't actually want your brand around or associated with, I'm sorry, we're not going to change the rules on that because we're still going to force you to buy everything else that we have. So,
well, of course, that's been a big deal to IPG and media brands. You have your media responsibility principles that you've published, and brand safety in the research we do, trust and reliability in your media partners and the brand safety that they offer come up as the two most important priorities. So how do you actually integrate brand safety into your decision-making process?
I mean, so for us, and this gets to the media responsibility conversation, is because brand safety is about content avoidance. Media responsibility is understanding that where you place ads matters, and what you were saying, that social contract that we have with people, that you consume content and it's funded by advertising. Advertising should be responsible for only funding content that contributes positive outcomes to society and doesn't add to harm. And if you take that even a step further, the more you actually contribute to positive values to society, the more likely the environment's going to be brand safe overall. So it's the overarching principle on everything we do, and we have hard and serious, tough conversations. And what we've been at least successful in doing for clients is bridging media responsibility with corporate social responsibility. So companies historically have always had corporate social responsibility guidelines and ethical investment guidelines for suppliers and where they source product and everything else. And I'm like, hey, if you want that, there's modern slavery laws. If you want that for, where your suppliers you work with, why isn't that a requirement on, you don't want harassment and discrimination in companies where you buy media? Get both sides of the house talking.
It's interesting because more and more clients are putting diversity requirements in at their agencies and media partners. I think they need to move more quickly in implementing that. But moving on and trying to stick with your agenda, Drew, Drew, I'm going to come back and I'm going to ask you the question about cancel culture, because I want to figure out what you saw how you saw that fitting into our conversation. But gee, I'd like to just give you two words: Cookieless chaos.
Yeah.
How do you deal with it?
I don't know that it's chaos. I'll tell you why. There's a difference between kind of having a toy taken away from you and you only versus just the toy universally disappearing, right? What we do in general is unfortunately or fortunately a relative game, right? Your competition is relative. The concept of doing better is relative, right? So I don't necessarily know that it's chaos.
Okay.
But it does hold true. I mean, I'm going to kind of like dip back to my love, which is performance, right? Joshua knows that. So kind of, yes, you take away the cookies, there's quite a few things that you take out of our bag, but I do think it forces real practitioners to come out of the woodwork versus like the amateurs, right? Performance practitioners are about kind of the understanding of the why, not the kind of like just the machine kind of like pushing of the what, right? Like it's all about the why. It's about the sequence of events, right? Performance practitioners know how to take a leap of faith and they understand causality, right? So I do think in one way, it's actually really good for our industry. We kind of have to go back to those roots and try to connect what it is that we do in media to human behavior. I think kind of like that will help all of us. Yeah.
I feel like I'm back like when I was chair of ad tech from 05 to 09. And like every contextual targeting vendor on the planet, like, coming to ad tech, and it's like, we're sort of back to that, like contextual targeting, right?
That's
Joshua, do you have thoughts on that?
I mean, it does feel a little bit like Back to the Future. I'm not old enough to remember that time in the industry. But look, I think there's been an overemphasis, I think, on the pivot to contextual without actually sort of focusing. Like people talk about the death of the cookie without, and G was good, explicitly saying it's the death of the third-party cookie. So first-party cookies will still exist. Publishers that have first-party cookies will still exist. The ability to do smart, intelligent things with first-party data will still exist. What disappears, and Jack, to sort of take your chaos thing, but I wouldn't say chaos, is what disappears is what Shoshana Zuboff really calls the surveillance capitalism side of things. The surreptitious surveillance of everyone goes away. We enter a world of transparency, consent, meaningful identity-based connections. And if people don't want to participate, then contextual becomes a relevant thing to look at. Then you can look at all sorts of other solutions, but you've got to find a balance. What it's very easy to do in this situation is over pivot to one way or the other, or assume one solution is a fait accompli. Like the thing I always like to point out is Google talks about flock a lot, and there'll be a lot of people that assume that flock is inevitable because Google's an large industry giant. But if you look in Europe, the European regulators consider flock not even GDPR compliant. So on that basis,
I think we know what you're talking about, Joshua, because you're getting into some flocking here. I'm not sure.
It's like all of these solutions pre-assume that regulatory environments are going to allow them to exist. And so we shouldn't pivot to contextual. We should actually sort of look at everything and just keep moving forward on the basis that it's an more exciting time to be alive in advertising than it has been in a while.
And as you look at this whole conversation, and coming back to the theme of consumer choice, consumers are obviously making a choice to move away from advertising supported media, whether it's streaming, OTT, or any other forms where advertising is decreasing in its value contribution to a lot of the major media companies. Advertising, they're looking for alternative revenue streams. So as you, from a digital buyer, but just media buyer point of view, I would think that you would see a lot of television dollars coming down into a lot of the media that would be, that are digitally originated, social media, search, it's a broad mobile, it's a broad spectrum. But at the same time, you do have the networks that have great demand and advertisers seemingly willing to pay 30% plus increases on cost per thousand. So as you see consumer choice impacting, where do you see the future of advertising?
Go for it, Chief.
CG, he's getting back at you. He wants you to go first.
No, he also knows like TV is like it's one that will get a reaction out of me. So TV is tough for me. I have kind of I have a great respect and appreciation for the relationship consumers still have with TV and big experiential media moments. There's nothing like it. I mean, like think about like we were talking about, like think about like the anticipation of a post-pandemic world and how much of it is wrapped into what we remember as like the big tentpole TV moments, right? So there's that. There's also the admission that from a practical sense, we will admit there's not kind of like really been a challenger when it comes to television's ability to build reach really quickly. There's nothing like it, right? But I also think there's kind of the other side of the coin, which is we have to start putting more tension around like, what is reach doing? And what does reach really even mean, right? So, and who are you reaching, right? So kind of like you can't have a conversation about first party data and human understanding without having a conversation around that other side of the coin. And then the premium becomes that, then it makes sense. It either makes sense or it doesn't make sense. But those two things have to happen first.
And in that context, because you mentioned performance as being your first love, so I'll flip a little to one of the major trends in media is the integration of commerce and media buying. And I'm speaking about not only Amazon, but Walmart Media Group, Roundel Media Reimagined by Target, Kohl's, Kroger's, CVS, Walgreens, all introducing media inventory sales options. So Joshua, let me start with you and go back to G. How is that impacting on your work at the agencies, especially since you may represent one or more of those companies at your holding company?
Yeah, look, there's sort of two parts to that, which is it's not surprising that they're all moving into the space. And it's not because like telcos 10 years ago that all thought they could be media companies. It's because retailers absolutely categorically will always sit on first party data because they're at the point of transaction. And so that's immensely powerful in an addressable advertising world going forward. I think the biggest challenge for media agencies and our clients is all of these retailers all want a slice of the media investment dollars that brands are spending, and that could quite easily consume 100% of the media budget. And that's not an ideal outcome for any brand, especially when they retail and distribute across multiple channels, including places that don't have retail media offerings. And you're seeing like what we've seen in television, you're seeing a bundling of merchandising, like in-store merchandising, and media needs to be done to actually get preferential placement on shelves and all these other complexities. So I think it's the right way forward in terms of first-party data and the future of advertising. The bit where it's going to get really complicated is how do you not make it just a tax on the normal state of play, which is merchandising in retail.
Yeah. G, additional point of view on that?
I love this topic. I love it so much. But it kind of like I would add to what Joshua kind of like mentioned, kind of like this is a continuing trend. It's not just retail. Brands are going to be they're going to start looking more and more like media owners. They certainly look like creators, right? And kind of when you intersect that with commerce, especially when you look at some of the trends that are happening in Asia, some of the trends that we're seeing here, where does commerce even begin, right? It's not just within the bounds of a retail media or like a social commerce media platform. It's starting to like begin and end in many, many places. I mean, we just started talking about live commerce. So it reminds me a little bit of the early days of mobile, and I count myself as like one of the old ladies of mobile when it came about. And we started asking questions like, you know, at some point, everything will be mobile. And that actually happened. I think we're about to see kind of a similar evolution with commerce.
That's a conversation, Drew, that I think deserves its own panel, because it's such an important part of the industry going forward, and that shift of budgets from below the line to above the line and the impact of that. But Drew, I do want to come back to you and say, where does cancel culture fit into this conversation?
Alliteration. No, I mean, in part, you know, part of my job is trying to come up with snappy session titles. I think the context for me, I guess specifically, was a little bit of, well, it's both G and Joshua's world, but on the brand safety and just what Joshua was talking about earlier, and maybe the you know, the one area where maybe addressable TV sort of lacks is not being able to associate exactly with the content that you want to or don't want to. So it's also about that too, right? So, you know, particularly in social, with all of the conversations going on, and oftentimes in a canceled type of context, or at least, you know, people at loggerheads. And then is my message somehow popping up somewhere in there while two people are fighting about somebody getting canceled? You know, so it really fed into the broader sort of brand safety, contextual, and where is my brand in this digital world? When a lot of what's happening out in social and some of the digital channels is these huge cancel culture types of debates, arguments, etc. So outside of alliteration,
that too deserves a conversation that could incorporate Clubhouse and the shifts in social media and a lot of other conversations. I would, in fairness, like to give the last word to Josh and G, if you could take maybe 30, 45 seconds each just on a topic that you think is really, you know, you want to make sure you get mentioned into this this conversation. G, you want to jump in? I see you thinking.
Yeah, sure. I think I just remembered kind of the title of the panel. So this started out because I talked to Drew about the back half of the year. One of our media predictions when we came into the year was this notion of revenge living. And I can't wait. I think the second half of the year is going to see incredible competition for kind of that restoration, renewal, and think about holiday. How much are you guys looking forward to a normal holiday?
Yeah. And Drew, your earlier panel got into that too. You know, each one of these topics is unto itself a panel. Josh, last word.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief, which is, and I'll reiterate what I said before, think about your media investment as something that's a gift, and every dollar you invest matters, and that means you should actually be investing it responsibly and ensuring you're not funding things that drive division, hate, and all those other problems we've seen in society. If we want this process of renewal, we've got to invest in things that drive renewal in society as well.
Drew, thank you for giving me the opportunity to join you today.
Absolutely. Thanks to all three of you. It's I do hope we get to see each other in person sometime very, very soon.
Indeed.
Amen.
Great. Thanks again. Have a great holiday weekend, everybody.